There's translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Okay, so it goes. Sri Sukadev Goswami continued. Thereafter, because of his advanced position in devotional life, Maharaj Amrisha, who no longer desired to live with material things, retired from active family life. He divided his property among his sons, who were equally as qualified as he himself, took the order of Vanaprastha and went to the forest to concentrate his mind fully upon Lord Vasudev. Here's a purport. As a pure devotee, Maharaj Amrish was liberated in any condition of life because, as enunciated by Srila Rupa Goswami, a devotee is always liberated. Ihas yasha harir dasya kamana manasa gira nikhilasu api avasthastu Jivan Mukta Sa Uchyate. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami thus instructs that if one's only desire is service to the Lord, he is liberated in any condition of life. Maharaj Amrish was undoubtedly liberated in any condition, but as an ideal king, he accepted the Vanaprastha order of retirement from family life. It is essential for one to renounce family responsibilities and fully concentrate on the lotus feet of Vasudev. Therefore, Maharaj Amrish divided the kingdom amongst his sons and retired from family life. Om Jnana Tirimandascha Kananchana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Savetam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagadpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishephanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpa Tirupascha Kripa Sindhu Avebacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So once again, the translation. Sri Sukadev Goswami continued. Thereafter, because of his advanced position in devotional life, Maharaj Amrish, who no longer desired to live with material things, retired from active family life. He divided the property amongst his sons, who were equally as qualified, and he himself took the order of Vanaprastha and went to the forest to concentrate his mind upon Lord Vasudev. Okay, Hare Krishna. So I'm a little nervous to give a class because there's so many exalted Vaishnavas in front of me, but I'll see this as an opportunity just to share whatever realizations I've actually come across with this. So I was thinking, before we even go into the purport and the translation, it would be nice to just see what the whole picture is, because sometimes we can get so focused in the verse itself that we get lost as to what the plot is all about. So I'll just give a brief summary of what's been happening up till now at this point. So we're reading the 9th canto from the Bhagavatam, and it's a chapter which is actually entitled Durvasa Muni's Life Spared. That's what the chapter's called. So as mentioned, we're talking about Maharaj Amrish. He's a great Vaishnava, and when you read his past, and there's so many lessons we can actually draw from this. It's mentioned actually, Maharaj Amrisha actually comes from the dynasty of Vaivastata Manu. From that dynasty, there's a great king called Nabhaga. Right? There's a king called Nabhaga. So the king Nabaga once actually decided that he wanted to actually live a lifelong of celibacy. So he wanted to become a brahmachari. So he became a brahmachari, and Nabaga had many brothers. And his brothers then, they thought that since Nabaga's actually become a brahmachari, so let's divide our father's kingdom into amongst us, but not give anything to him. Because he was a lifelong brahmachari, so why does he need all of this wealth? Then one day after some time, Nabaga actually comes back, and then he actually asked for his share of his father's kingdom. And the brother says, well, your share of the father's kingdom is our father himself. That's your inheritance. So then Nabaga goes to his father, and he says, oh, father, my brother said that they've divided all your property, and they said, my inheritance is you. So Nabaga's father then actually says that don't be cheated by such cheap words, And then he gave him a specific instruction. He goes, the descendants of Angira, they're performing a sacrifice. And he goes, even though the descendants of Angira are actually very intelligent, he's mentioned that on the 6th day of the sacrifice, they're actually going to commit a mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you these 2 mantras, and if you actually tell them and recite these 2 mantras, it will actually nullify the mistake, and the sacrifice will actually become more successful. So then his father, Nabaga's father, actually gave him the mantra, and then he goes to the arena where the sacrifice was happening. On the 6th day, of course, the descendants made the mistake, of not chanting the mantras properly, and in return, he actually recited these 2 mantras, and hence the mistake was nullified. The descendants of Angira were very happy, and they wanted to reward him with something. So all the wealth that was accumulated for this sacrifice that they got, they actually offered it back to King Nabaga, So he was entitled to all this wealth, a lot of wealth, and so they were very grateful. The sacrifice was very successful. They gave him the wealth, and then the descendants of Angira departed for the heavenly planets. At this moment, from the northern side, that's what the Bhagavatam explains. So there's a black complex personality comes and approaches Nabaga. And he goes, all this wealth that you have, it actually belongs to me. And Nabaga then actually says, no, actually it doesn't. It actually belongs to me. The descendants of Angira actually gave it to me. So then there was a bit of a conflict, and they were debating. And then this personality, the black complex personality that the Bhagavatam describes, he actually recommends, let's go to your father, he says to Nabaga, and let's actually solve this dispute that we're having. So both of the personalities then go to Nabaga's father, and they actually present their arguments. And Nabaga's father actually says, you know what the black complexion personality is saying is true. He goes, all the wealth that Nabaga accumulated is actually entitled for Lord Shiva, and therefore you should give it to Lord Shiva. Nabaga, being a very obedient son, he actually went to Lord Shiva, offered his obeisance, offered prayers, and he actually gave all the wealth away. Very easy, very detached. Lord Shiva then spoke to Nabaga, and he said that I'm very pleased by your prayers and your offering, Yes, you're right that this offering actually belongs to me, but because you're such an obedient son of your father, and you listen to your father, I'm actually going to give all this wealth back to you. So therefore, Nabaga actually got all the wealth back, and it was a lot of wealth. It's mentioned it is actually the son of this Nabaga was actually Maharaj Amrish. Amrish Maharaj was the son of Nabaga. So this is where Amrish Maharaj comes. And from the very beginning, Amrish Maharaj was actually very wealthy. It says that he was actually ruling the entire earth, including the 7 islands. We hear the 7 islands all the time. When you think, what's the 7 islands? And then just this morning it clocked onto me, actually the 7 island represents the 7 continents we have. So then hence means he ruled the whole earth, which makes sense. So he actually had a lot of wealth. He was very powerful personality, and he was very exalted personality. But the quality of Amrish Maharaj was that he was very detached. For him, he wasn't disturbed by material things. He saw material things as, something that you have in dreams, and then it gets destroyed. So he was very detached like that. The entire world, he saw it as a stone, basically. That's the description the Bhagavatam is actually giving. And he was very attached to serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Many times they say, actually, we should engage in devotional service 24 hours a day. And that's like, how does that work? But actually in the Bhagavatam, this section is actually explained how Maharaj Amrisha actually engaged in devotional service 24 hours a day. And he's mentioned that every single aspect that belonged to him, he utilized it in Krishna service. So he goes that he used his mind in Krishna service. How do you think he used his mind in Krishna service? Remembering Krishna. So it's mentioned, Bhagavatam mentioned that he was meditating upon the Lord all the time. He also used his words in Krishna service. How do you think he did that? What was that? Glorifying Krishna, exactly, and his qualities and pastimes. How did he utilize his hands? Cleaning the temple. Gundicha Mahajan, right? So it's mentioned that he used his hands to clean the temples. His ears? Hearing Krishna Katha. Yeah. It's mentioned his eyes? Seeing the form of the deities. And then touch. How did he use the sense of his touch? Embracing the devotees. Thank you. Nose? Smelling the? Yeah, it's mentioned specifically that he used his nose to smell Tulsi Marani, which is offered at the lotus feet of Krishna. And his tongue? Prashadam. Legs? Okay. Yeah, walking to the holy dhams or the temple. His head? Bowing down, exactly. And his desires? Completely for the satisfaction of Krishna. So it's nicely explained how Maharaj Amrish actually utilized everything he had in his service to Krishna 24 hours a day. It's also mentioned, actually, Maharaj Amrish was a very powerful leader. When I was reading this purport, I'll go through it. One of the lessons I actually drew from it is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. It's mentioned that whatever a great man does, common man follow, and whatever examples or standards he sets, everyone will actually follow in his footstep. And it's mentioned because Maharaj Amrish was such a great exalted devotee and he was practicing what he was preaching, it's mentioned all of his subordinates or members of the citizens that he was ruling were actually also had the similar quality as Maharaj Amrish did. It's mentioned all of the citizens at that time when he was ruling were actually attached to hearing Krishna Katha. They had no material desires and they were just completely absorbed in devotional service. And everyone was actually very happy being ruled under Maharaj Amrish. Like that. So he was a great leader and it just shows that, what a great man does, common man follow. And through this you can see that. Then one day Maharaj Amrish was actually observing an Ekadashi vow. He's observing Ekadashi vow in Dwadasi for 1 year along with his wife. And it was that during the Kartik month that the vow finished and he was fasting for 3 days. And when he finished his fast, he actually bathed in the Yamuna and then he did Maha Abhishek of the deities. So he did the whole Abhishek, and at the same time he gave away, the Bhagavatam mentions 60 crores of cows. Now just in case if you're wondering, I had to figure out what 60 crore means. Jai Shri Shri Radha Gokul Nanda ki, Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Gaur Nitai ki, Jai. 60 crore cows is basically 600 million cows he gave away in charity to Brahmanas. That's a lot of cows. Imagine we having in Bhaktivedanta Manor. I don't think they have a problem about, with the law that every cow should have a specific, area for pasturing, a pasturing ground. So it's mentioned that 600 million cows he gave away. Each of the cows had gold-plated horns and the hooves were actually silver-plated. So he was, as you can see, very wealthy. He fed all the Brahmanas and when they were fully satisfied, he was prepared to actually break his Ekadashi fast. And just as he was about to do that, the great sage Durrasa Muni comes along. And so Amrish Maharaj then actually welcomes Durrasa Muni and he actually worships him with different paraphernalias and he actually says, please take some prashadam. Durrasa Muni happily agreed, but he goes, I have to actually go and perform my ritualistic activities. So then he actually goes to the Yamuna and he actually bathes in Yamuna and he starts meditating on the impersonal Brahman, is mentioned. And in this meditation, it took a very long time for him to actually do the meditation. And in the process, what happened was Maharaj Amrish was getting quite worried because the muhurta for breaking the fast was approaching. There's only one muhurta left. So he had to break his fast. So he actually goes to all the other brahmanas seeking their advice that, look, here's a situation, I need to break fast. And only on the advice of the brahmanas, he decides to break the fast. And hence, what does he do? He takes he drinks water. In the Bhagavatams mentioned, by just drinking water is considered breaking the fast and not breaking the fast. Like that. And then he started, when he drank water, he's still waiting for Durrasa Muni, and he started meditating upon Lord Krishna within his heart. At this point, Durrasa Muni comes, and by his mystic abilities, he could actually sense that this personality, Maharaj Amrish, has actually broken his fast. Durrasa Muni was hungry, and he felt neglected, and hence he just started saying all these abusive language stuff to Durrasa Muni, to Maharaj Amrish, and hence he becomes very furious. What does Durrasa Muni do? He actually takes a lock of some hair from his head, and with his mystic ability, he actually creates a demon out of this. And then this demon starts chasing Maharaj Amrish to kill him. Maharaj Amrish was very detached, and he was fully dependent on the Lord. So when the demon was attacking Maharaj Amrish, he was actually composed and just meditating on the Lord. And as the demon is approaching Maharaj Amrish, we hear, or we've read in the Bhagavatam, that actually Sudarshan Chakra comes and kills the demon. Durrasa Muni then sees this, that his endeavor becomes futile, and hence he becomes very afraid because the Sudarshan Chakra is chasing after him. And it's mentioned now, Durrasa Muni is running all around the world, everywhere, from every corner. It's mentioned he goes into the caves, running away from the Sudarshan Chakra. He goes within the ocean. And even still, he's running everywhere. The Sudarshan Chakra is right behind him, touching him, and it's actually burning him alive, basically. And then finally, Durrasa Muni decides to go to Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, and both of them actually says, look, none of our powers can even compete with Lord Vishnu, So the only person that can help you is actually Lord Vishnu. And so the interesting thing is, in the Bhagavatam mentions that Durrasa Muni actually had the ability or the qualification to go to the Vaikuntha planets, because he actually goes to the Vaikuntha planets to actually petition at Lord Vishnu. So he goes to Lord Vishnu in the Vaikuntha Dham, and then even Lord Vishnu was actually helpless. He goes, you know what, I'm actually fully under the control of my pure devotees. So the only person that can save you is Durrasa Muni. And therefore, Durrasa Muni then realized the exalted position of Amrish Maharaj. And he goes to Amrish Maharaj, he actually grabs hold of his legs, Durrasa Muni, and he offers all these prayers. And Amrish Maharaj felt very embarrassed at the situation, that a Brahmana is actually holding his feet and offering all these prayers. And then he then prays to Sudarshan Chakra. He goes that, he just glorifies Sudarshan Chakra, and he says that whatever pious activities I or any members of my family have done, please in exchange forgive this Brahmana. And the Sudarshan Chakra was very pleased, it went, and then Durrasa Muni then was finally relieved from this attack. And so there's exchange of glorification. And just to let you know, Durrasa Muni was wandering around for 1 year. And at that point, Amrish Maharaj would just stayed in that one position, one place, waiting for him to come back. He didn't eat, or it says he just drank water for 1 year. He comes back, he actually offers prasadam to Durrasa Muni, and then, Durrasa Muni goes about his way. And Amrish Maharaj then realizes his exalted position is mentioned. But he gives all full credit to Krishna. He goes, only because of him such things actually happen. And then it comes to today's verse, that after due course of time, Amrish Maharaj decided to actually give everything away to his family members, divided all his property, and then he actually decided to take Vanapras, retire from family life, and just focus completely on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like that. So we've got 10 minutes. So there's few lessons, when I was reading this purport, there's few things that actually could, kind of struck out to me. The one thing stuck out to me was, it's mentioned Maharaj Amrish was liberated in any condition of life. Why? Because he was a pure devotee, and he was liberated. So it's mentioned, Rupa Goswami instructs that if one only desires service is to the Lord, he is liberated in any condition of life. Now this was quite striking, because any condition of life means even when there was suffering, Amrish Maharaj was liberated. He was unaffected, And so this is one thing I drew across, and I'm going to show you a little diagram that helps me to comprehend this concept. If maybe Shipper, if we could just... so this is something I did a little earlier. that I could show you. Like, whenever we talk about karma, why do bad things happen, there's this one powerful model that Nectar of Devotion actually presents, you know, and I always find this very intriguing. And even at universities, when we actually present karma, this is a very powerful model that we can show. So first of all, you know, we talk about miseries and we talk about suffering. So it's mentioned that what is the, okay, maybe I shouldn't have, my question to you guys was going to be, what is the root cause of suffering? Now obviously you guys are reading the board so you can see the root cause of suffering is mentioned is ignorance. Okay? That's what Nectar of Devotion mentions. Okay, so it says everyone in this material world are suffering, right? But why are they suffering? And it's mentioned is actually ignorance. What do you think the ignorance is of? Yes, exactly. The biggest problem, the biggest illusion that people are under is the misidentification. They don't know who they are. So the illusion or the ignorance is of the fact of the true identity. In the material world, when people think that we're this material body, what happens is the next step is that they'll start getting desires. As living entities, we all have desires, and therefore, when you think you're this body, you will start desiring on the bodily platform. So because of ignorance of our true identity, we start getting material desires. When you get material desires, the next step is, when there is a desire, it's going to turn into an action. So you perform an action. So according to Nectar of Devotion, materialistic action is known as papam, which means that you will get reaction in this world. So what happens is two things. When you perform an action, two things happen. First thing that happens is you actually accumulate something called a parabdha karma. Now parabdha karma is something called unmanifested karma, which means that there is a reaction that is about to come to you, but it hasn't actually manifested yet. Okay, and a typical example that is mentioned is that when Dhritarashtra was when after the war, all of his sons were killed, and he asked Krishna that why did all of my sons actually died in the battlefield? So then Krishna recited that actually Dhritarashtra, he was a hunter 50 lifetimes ago. And as a hunter is mentioned, I think this, I vaguely remember, he was a hunter, he actually tried to shoot a male bird. But what happens is the male bird escaped, but he blinded the male bird. And because it escaped, Dhritarashtra became very angry, and he killed all the little 100 baby birds, you could say, of this male bird. And therefore Krishna says, you're getting a reaction for now. Hence you're blind and 100 of your kids have died. So then Dhritarashtra Muni asked then, but why did it take me 50 lifetimes for me to get this reaction? So Krishna goes, it actually took you 50 lifetimes to accumulate pious credit for you to actually even get sons. Like that. So for the 150 lifetime, he was accumulating unmanifested karma. And then when he got 100 sons, then he got manifested karma. You know? So when you have unmanifested karma, reaction, what happens is there's something called kutam, which is your material proclivity that increases. Material proclivity means a tendency to desire material things also increases. So it's a vicious cycle, as you can see. Material desire means material action, which means unmanifested reaction, which means your proclivity increases, which means you desire more material things, more action, and eventually you will get material reaction. Then you will actually suffer the consequence. Does that make sense? You know, so it's mentioned. The first lesson I could draw was this lesson. This is a great statement. I find it quite amazing. It's that sometimes in life we are imprisoned by our circumstances, but we're actually liberated by our consciousness. Okay, it's mentioned that we're imprisoned by our circumstances, but liberated by our consciousness. So it's mentioned that sometimes materially we'll be in a situation where it seems we're struggling or we're suffering, but with transcendental knowledge, you have uplifted your consciousness. Therefore, these problems that we go through becomes very insignificant. And that's why this purport makes sense, that in all conditions of life, he was liberated. Earlier this summer, I was traveling with Chandramauli Maharaj, and we were doing this program. There's July the 4th is like the National Independence Day for America. We were in Washington, D.C. And so we were having a parade, and there we were teaching japa meditation to people. And I heard a beautiful analogy to explain people how devotional service, one can actually overcome their suffering. You know, so in Washington, D.C., there's a building that looks like the White House, but it's called the Capitol. So I'd go to the people that we're teaching japa meditation to, and I say, if you stand in front of this big building, the Capitol, how big does the building look? And they say, oh, it looks humongous. And I say, when you're in a plane, how big does the building look then? And then they say the building will look very small. So then I said, similarly, it's mentioned that all our problems in life are compared to this big building, And it's mentioned that when you actually, through meditation and through transcendental knowledge, you do it, your consciousness actually becomes uplifted. You actually raise your consciousness. And when your consciousness is actually raised, all the problems in life become very insignificant, just like the building looks so small from the plane above. So transcendental knowledge is very powerful. It's mentioned, how do we actually become liberated in all situations? It's through wisdom like this, is it possible? So that's what first lesson I learned, that just by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, you get this wonderful transcendental knowledge where you can uplift your consciousness, and hence you can be liberated in every single aspect of your life, and stay focused on the goal. The second one we already discussed, what a great man does, common man follow. And we see from Amrish Maharaj that, through his example, he teaches us how we can constantly be engaged in service 24 hours a day. And the third lesson was how to engage in 24 hours a day. As I mentioned, all the different activities that we can use. And when I was preparing this class, I was just thinking that, you can actually, it's quite possible to engage in Krishna's service 24 hours a day. Like through the mind, through the words, through hands, eyes, and yes, just last 2 days ago, myself and Shiv Prabhu, we were in Cambridge. They had their Freshers' Fair. And I was just reflecting that if I wanted to think of Krishna 24 hours a day, I could have. Like yesterday, we went to Freshers' Fair. All the students were coming and we were trying to sign them up to the Krishna Consciousness Society. And it was a great experience, and I was just thinking, how it's so easy to engage all of these things in Christian service. I was just thinking in my mind, when I'm reflecting back, the mind is always thinking, how can I present this Krishna consciousness to the students in a way they can accept and hence they will sign up. So the mind is always constantly engaged. Words, well, you're actually talking to them. So how can you engage the thought process of your mind into words which can actually then go into their heart and then they actually become transformed. Hands, well, you're shaking their hands. No, but we were staying in devotee's house, so we were cooking prasadam and stuff like that. So your hands are being engaged. Ears, your eyes, all of these things are being engaged. Even touch. Shiv Prabhu was a little bewildered, because it's his first time. So sometimes I had to embrace him to just kind of keep him pacified. So that was very effective as well. Nose, tongue. Tongue is a very powerful thing. Like when we found out we had a table, on our right-hand side, it was the Islamic Society. And on our left-hand side, it said the Meth Society. So I thought it was like some sort of drug society or something, But then when I went there, I realized it's actually a Christian Methodist society. So it's a Christian group. And generally when you have like a society like this and you're trying to give Christian consciousness, it's like you can feel this heavy tension, And me and she were like, this is going to be interesting, man. We're going to have some rockers, So then luckily we had 2 packets of cookies. And we thought, what, let's just soften their heart. So when Shiv went, first thing he did, he gave the bag of cookies to the Islamic Society, and then he gave a bag of cookies to the Christian Society. And after that, they were pacified. Because actually what it is, when we're doing the Freshers' Fair, we can't stand in front of the tables. You have to stand behind. But we're a little rebellious. We'll stand in front of them and try to grab everyone. Sometimes we'll block their table as well and stop them from signing people up. Because we gave them the prasadam, they were a little pacified, So even the tongue was being utilized. Legs, head, and desires. Even desires is such a powerful thing. Just 2 stories I'd like to share. Yesterday, when we were in Cambridge, it's amazing how Krishna consciousness is such a powerful thing. It's actually very universal. So I was at Freshers' Fair and I see this one Chinese girl. She's a student. She comes up and starts searching our table. At that time, I was talking to someone. When I finished, I started talking to her, and I go, "Hey, how's it going?" And then, my standard lines, I'll speak to her, and she goes, "I'm actually looking for the Bhagavad Gita." And I'm like, "You what?" You don't hear that at university, because I haven't even pitched anything to her. And then I started getting to know her. She's basically from China, and she actually did some backpacking. She did some traveling, so she went to South America, to Peru, And there she goes, "I actually stayed in one of your temples." And she just had an amazing experience. She goes, every day we would read the Bhagavad Gita, we recite it, and it was very powerful. And I actually want the Bhagavad Gita. And the one time when somebody actually wants the Bhagavad Gita, you don't have it, because it was in the bag, in the car and stuff. So we took her details and it was an incentive. If you really want it, then come to a society event, So that was an interesting experience, that people are actually looking for Krishna. It was a desire, like that. So, and how to engage in 24 hours. So yeah, these were just a few lessons that I wanted to share. it was supposed to be a discussion point. So I was wondering maybe if we could get one lesson that maybe from the Prabhu's side and a lesson from Mataji's side that we can draw, so we can take all of this together and meditate during the day. Anybody? Any lessons?